In a world where power, privilege, and secrecy intertwine, few have witnessed the inner workings of Donald Trump's private life like Anthony Senecal. For nearly 3 decades, Senecal served as Trump's personal butler at the opulent Mar-a-Lago estate, becoming an intimate observer of the mogul's eccentricities and daily routines. Now, at 78, Senecal is breaking his silence, offering unprecedented insights into the man behind the headlines. From peculiar habits to behind-the-scenes moments, Senecal's revelations paint a portrait of a man who is as enigmatic as he is influential. In this video, we delve deep into Senecal's experiences, uncovering stories that have remained hidden for years. Prepare for a journey into the private world of Donald Trump, as seen through the eyes of someone who served him up close. The unconventional morning routine. Every morning at Mar-a-Lago unfolded with the precision of a military drill, all orchestrated around one man's unshakable routine. Donald Trump, long before the cameras turned on and headlines churned, would wake up before dawn. The sun barely began to stretch across the Florida coast, yet inside the gilded walls of his estate, a familiar pattern took place like clockwork. Waiting just outside the door of Trump's private quarters was his longtime butler, Anthony Senecal, a man who came to know the nuances of Trump's moods, preferences, and patterns more intimately than almost anyone else. In his hands, a thick stack of newspapers. Not digital, not summaries, physical newspapers, ink-stained fingers and all. Trump insisted on them. From the New York Times to the New York Post and several regional and business journals in between, Trump wanted everything. The good, the bad, and especially the ugly. But it wasn't just a vanity habit, this was tactical. According to Senecal, Trump would spend hours dissecting those papers, not skimming headlines, actually reading, highlighting, circling stories, even scribbling comments in the margins. It wasn't rare for him to call a staffer later that day to challenge a number or correct a quote he didn't like. He absorbed information like a sponge and then used it as ammunition, in business meetings, interviews, and even on Twitter. And while the media often painted Trump as impulsive, Senecal saw the opposite in the early hours. These moments were calculated, strategic. As others still lay asleep, Trump was already framing his narrative for the day. Whether preparing for a TV appearance or plotting a real estate deal, the morning was when the chessboard was laid out and the first moves decided. It wasn't just newspapers either. Business memos, legal briefs, political polls. If it was sent to him overnight, Trump had probably already read it before 7 a.m. He didn't rely on aides to filter content for him. He wanted raw information. He didn't trust other people to tell him what he needed to know, Senecal explained in an interview. He had to see it for himself. There's an old saying that the most successful people don't just react to the day, they dominate it. Trump lived that mantra before most people finished their morning coffee. These quiet, solo hours, usually uninterrupted, were sacred. Even family members knew better than to barge in. According to Senecal, unless there was a true emergency, that time was his alone. The rest of the day could be filled with phone calls, advisors, press, or rallies, but those early hours, that was when the gears started turning. He used that time not only to process but to plan. Senecal noted that Trump would often speak aloud to himself, rehearsing speeches, thinking through negotiations, or testing phrasing for interviews. Sometimes he'd mock a political opponent or try out a zinger for his next rally. Other times he'd jot down bullet points for a meeting. His notepads were filled with fragmented sentences, punchy phrases, and reminders, many of which would show up later in his tweets or off-the-cuff remarks. For Trump, the morning wasn't about peace or meditation. It was about momentum. There was a deliberate rhythm to it. Wake early, consume, process, prepare. He didn't see it as work. He saw it as the price of staying ahead. It's this side of Trump, the disciplined early riser, obsessively focused, living hours ahead of his critics, that the public rarely saw. And while many scoffed at his brash persona or media blow-ups, Senecal insists they missed the foundation beneath the performance. Because behind every fiery quote or headline-grabbing tweet was a morning, often still dark, when Trump was alone with the news, shaping the storm before it ever broke. The steak that rocks. When it comes to food, most people bend toward the culinary wisdom of expert chefs or popular opinion, not Donald Trump. His tastes are firmly his own, and perhaps nowhere is this more evident than in how he orders his steak. So well done, his longtime butler Anthony Senecal once said it rocks on the plate. For Trump, steak isn't just a meal, it's a ritual, a power play, a symbol of consistency and control. And unlike some politicians who tailor their image to match the elite circles they move in, Trump has always made it known that he likes what he likes, regardless of what anyone thinks. Senecal, who worked for Trump for decades at Mar-a-Lago, recalled the exactness required in preparing the dish. There were no shortcuts. The meat had to be cooked until it was dark brown all the way through, no hint of pink allowed. Anything less and it was sent back, sometimes without a word, sometimes with a scowl. The cooking instructions weren't suggestions, they were commands. Over time, Mar-a-Lago's kitchen staff came to understand the gravity of this order. There were whispers in the kitchen when Trump was in residence. Chefs double-checked cook times. Steaks were poked, tested, and left on the grill longer than any culinary school would ever recommend. "If it doesn't bounce like a hockey puck, it's not done," one line cook joked, though not within earshot of Trump. But the steak wasn't just about taste. It was an extension of Trump's identity. People close to him often noted that he didn't drink, didn't smoke, and wasn't one to indulge in rich, complex dishes. His palate leaned toward the familiar and straightforward, comfort food, Americana classics, and meals that could be counted on. For someone who operates in a world of constant unpredictability, Trump's dinner plate became a rare place of total control. In public, food often becomes a branding tool for politicians. Think of how candidates eat local food at state fairs or awkwardly chomp on pizza slices for photo ops. Trump, however, turned his own culinary quirks into part of his mythos. The man who flies on a gold-plated jet eats his steak like a working-class diner customer. Well done, with ketchup on the side. Critics have mocked him for this over the years. Celebrity chefs, food columnists, and social media users have questioned how someone so wealthy could prefer steak prepared that way. But that's part of the point. Trump has never bent to elite taste. To him, it's not about sophistication, it's about personal preference and unapologetic decisiveness. According to Senecal, Trump would sometimes order steak multiple times a week, always the same way. And if it wasn't steak, it was something equally simple and predictable. His meals rarely changed. He didn't want to be surprised. To staff members, this consistency made their jobs easier, but it also revealed something deeper about the man they worked for. He didn't need flair. He needed familiarity. Trump's insistence on having things just so extended beyond the steak. The way it was served, the temperature of the plate, the type of glass used for his Diet Coke, all of it was managed with a precision that bordered on obsessive. Staff had to anticipate his reactions. If something wasn't to his standard, it wasn't simply corrected. It was scrutinized, and sometimes the person responsible would never be given a second chance. This attention to detail spoke volumes about Trump's personality. In his world, the little things mattered, especially when they were under his roof. Control wasn't just about big decisions like real estate deals or political strategy. It was about every detail, down to how many seconds the steak stayed on the grill. In many ways, the steak that rocks is a metaphor for how Trump sees the world: firm, unbending, and completely in line with his expectations. It wasn't just a meal. It was a message. One that said, "This is how I want it, and I don't care if it's not how you'd do it." For Trump, that wasn't stubbornness. That was strength. And for those who cooked or served that steak, getting it wrong wasn't just a culinary mistake. It was a challenge to the hierarchy. In the end, that sizzling, well-done slab of meat became more than food. It became a tradition, a test, a statement, and it had to rock, every time. The Bulger's call. When you're working in the orbit of a man like Donald Trump, reading the room isn't just a social skill, it's survival. For Anthony Senecal, Trump's longtime butler at Mar-a-Lago, understanding his employer's moods became an unspoken art form, something he honed over decades of close proximity to one of America's most polarizing figures. Trump's emotional state, Senecal learned early on, had the power to influence the entire atmosphere at the estate. A cheerful Trump meant smooth sailing for everyone, staff, guests, and even random visitors. But a disgruntled or brooding Trump? That could send a wave of tension rippling across the palm-lined corridors of Mar-a-Lago. And Senecal, the ever-watchful gatekeeper, made it his mission to manage those moods with the precision of a backstage producer directing a live performance. One such moment, now legend among staff, perfectly captured the creative lengths Senecal would go to keep Trump's spirits high. Trump had just arrived at Mar-a-Lago after what was reportedly a particularly frustrating day. Senecal, who could sense the storm brewing before Trump's limo even came to a full stop, sprang into action. He called for a local bugler, not just any performer, but one specifically instructed to play "Hail to the Chief" as Trump stepped out of the vehicle. The effect was immediate and unmistakable. The powerful brass notes echoed across the grand driveway, catching Trump off guard in the best way. His usual scowl gave way to a smirk, then a chuckle. Within seconds, his shoulders relaxed, and the tension that had traveled with him melted into the Florida breeze. That small but theatrical act, a single trumpet and a well-timed cue, completely transformed the energy of his arrival. But this wasn't just about music. It was about symbolism. "Hail to the Chief" is traditionally reserved for U.S. presidents, and even though Trump wasn't in office at the time, Senecal understood that invoking that anthem struck the perfect chord with Trump's larger-than-life self-image. It was a clever stroke of ego management, something Senecal had mastered. This wasn't an isolated case either. Senecal developed a toolbox of subtle tricks to either preempt or soothe Trump's temperamental swings. He would adjust lighting and temperature in certain rooms before Trump entered. He would change music playlists, delay the presence of guests, or quietly alert kitchen staff to expect last-minute changes to the menu, all based on how Trump looked when he walked in. Sometimes it was as simple as changing the TV channel. Trump loved to keep a television on in the background, toggling between networks. If Senecal sensed that a certain station was triggering irritation, he'd switch it before Trump noticed, always without drawing attention. It wasn't about deception. It was about strategic maintenance. It wasn't just a matter of convenience for Trump either. When Trump was in a bad mood, it wasn't just the staff who felt it. It could derail meetings, ruin events, or cause high-profile guests to reconsider their stays. Senecal understood that managing Trump's mood wasn't personal. It was operational. Behind these small but intentional decisions was a deep understanding of Trump's psyche. Senecal didn't rely on guesswork. He studied patterns. A furrowed brow after a phone call, likely bad business news, a faster-than-usual stride into the main hall. He wanted answers, and fast. The wrong entree at lunch? That could lead to an afternoon of brooding silence. A scratchy towel in the guest suite, you might never hear the end of it. Senecal's methods, while seemingly theatrical, were grounded in the same core principle: control the environment to protect the principle. Just like in politics or business, perception was everything. And Senecal's job was to ensure that Trump's perception of his domain remained undisturbed and optimized. He even trained new staff on these unwritten rules. They were taught to observe, anticipate, and pivot quickly. If Trump had one of his preferred guests staying over, flowers had to match a specific color scheme. If a press call was expected the next day, morning coffee service had to arrive exactly when Trump emerged. Not before, not after. The burglar incident, while humorous in hindsight, exemplified a broader truth about life around Donald Trump. Everything was performance. Every entrance, every meal, and every greeting had the potential to shape the tone of the day. And for Senecal, the bugler wasn't just playing a tune. He was setting the stage, resetting the mood, and re-establishing order in a world that revolved around one man's temperament. And in that world, few understood the power of timing and a well-played note better than Anthony Senecal, the red and white hat. At Mar-a-Lago, Donald Trump didn't need to say a word for his staff to know exactly what kind of day they were about to have. The clue? His choice of hat. According to longtime butler Anthony Senecal, the color of Trump's signature ball cap functioned like a traffic light for those around him. If he emerged in a red hat, usually his well-known Make America Great Again cap, it was a silent warning. Tread lightly. Approach only if absolutely necessary. The red hat meant trouble, frustration, or just a plain bad mood. It was his version of do not disturb, except in plain sight. On the other hand, the white hat signaled calm, approachability, openness. It wasn't just a fashion preference, it was a coded signal to the inner circle. White meant you could crack a joke, make a request, or present a new idea. It was as close to a green light as anyone ever got with Trump, who was known for being unpredictable and reactive, especially under pressure. This unspoken system quickly became part of the rhythm of daily life at the estate. New staff were quietly briefed. Longtime employees could tell which hat he would wear before he even picked it up, based on what was happening in the news or in his business dealings. And it worked, because everyone bought into it. The staff adjusted their tone, their body language, and even their timing based on what was sitting on Trump's head. What might seem like a quirky habit on the surface actually pointed to something deeper. Trump's hats weren't just a personal branding tool. They were about control. Mood, presentation, atmosphere. Everything had to be calibrated, including how people reacted to him. The hats offered him a way to silently dictate the terms of engagement, reinforcing his authority without having to issue a single command. By turning his wardrobe into a communication tool, Trump managed to streamline interactions, reduce friction, and maintain psychological dominance over his space. For a man who mastered media optics and messaging, it was yet another subtle way to control the narrative, starting with a hat, the reluctant retiree. Anthony Senecal's relationship with Donald Trump went far beyond the duties of a traditional butler. Over the decades at Mar-a-Lago, Senecal became a trusted fixture, a constant presence in an ever-changing world of politics, business, and high society. So when he hinted at the idea of retiring, Trump didn't just push back, he rejected it outright. "Tony, to retire is to expire," he reportedly told him, a blunt but telling expression of how much Senecal meant to him. Trump's insistence wasn't merely sentimental. Senecal wasn't just a loyal employee. He was a living repository of institutional memory. He knew the inner workings of the estate better than anyone. He understood how Trump liked things done, sometimes before Trump even had to say it. His presence provided continuity and order. In Trump's world, where chaos often swirled on the outside, that kind of stability was priceless. Even after stepping back from daily responsibilities, Senecal didn't disappear into quiet retirement. Instead, he transitioned into a new role, official historian of Mar-a-Lago. It was a title that fit him perfectly. He had witnessed the evolution of the estate firsthand, from private residence to winter White House. He knew every corner of the property, every renovation detail, and nearly every guest who passed through its doors. His continued involvement was more than ceremonial. It was a symbol of the deep personal loyalty that characterized his relationship with the Trump family. Senecal's decades of service were built on mutual respect and an unwavering sense of duty. In return, he was valued as more than staff. He was part of the fabric of the Trump legacy. His story is a rare glimpse into the loyalty and personal bonds forged behind the gates of Mar-a-Lago. That was just a glimpse into the extraordinary world behind the golden doors of Mar-a-Lago, as seen through the eyes of Donald Trump's longtime butler. If you found these revelations as fascinating as we did, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss more insider stories like this. What did you think of Senecal's perspective? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We're reading every one. And if you want us to cover more untold stories from Trump's inner circle, share this video to keep the conversation going.